Hello and welcome. My name is Ryan Belmore. I'm the owner and publisher of What's Up Noop, and today is Friday, October 7th. Continuing our conversations with the candidates, we are wrapping up, getting close to the end of our conversations with Newport School Committee candidates. This will be the 7th candidate that we have interviewed out of 8, and we are working with the 8th candidate to set up a way to do this as well. You can catch all of our conversations with the candidates that we've done so far this week with Newport City Council at large, as well as Newport School Committee on whatsupnoop.com, as well as you can watch them. You can listen to them as a podcast, all available on whatsupnoop.com. You can also find us however you listen to podcasts out there. What's Up Podcast with Ryan Belmore, and you can listen to these while you are on the run. He is Robert Power, and he is a newcomer. I call him a newcomer. He is not an incumbent, is probably the best way to say it. But you've been around schools for a little bit of time there, Robert.
Yes, I have. I was actually on the school committee a while back, and I worked for the Newport Public Schools for a number of years. And I've been here in Newport my whole life so far. So I'm not a newcomer in that respect. And I'm not new to what goes on in the school department or the school committee.
I like how you say Newport resident so far, because you never know what's going to come up, right?
We don't.
Robert, tell us a little bit about yourself for those that may not know anything about you.
Sure. Well, I went to Newport Public Schools. I grew up in Newport. I went off and got my bachelor's degree out of town. I got my master's degree locally, and I have a doctorate degree in educational administration. I've worked initially when I came back from college at the Maha Center in Newport, and then I left there and went over to Narragansett to be the director of special ed. I couldn't get a job in Newport teaching. I wanted to teach in Newport. At that time, there were no positions available. I then went to Bristol, which was Bristol, not Bristol Warren at the time, and I became a pupil personnel director there. I was there for 12 years. And then I got recruited back to Newport to work as a pupil personnel director in Newport. I became assistant superintendent and superintendent in Newport, the interim. And then I retired out of Newport after 16 and a half years. But that didn't end my educational ventures. I became the superintendent in Jamestown for a period of time. And then I went up to Pawtucket, where I did some work with them for middle schools. I also did a stint as a vice principal in middle school in South Providence. I worked down as assistant principal and did some consulting work in Westerly. I did some work in North Kingstown. I then came back. I went on the school committee here in Newport for a period of time. I went off the school committee, went over to Little Compton. I was superintendent over there for a number of years. And then I came back again just in 2019, did some work again for the Newport School Department, filling in for a couple of administrative positions that they needed to fill, vice principal at the middle school and also the pupil personnel director. And then COVID hit, and so I have not been in the schools since then. I've also spent quite a bit of time with Newport raising money. I did a whole capital campaign for the Thompson Middle School, and we built that school. And I was involved in the building of that school. We raised $1 million for furniture and technology. And I've done the same thing with the Pell School. We raised over $1 million for technology, and we have a trust fund with the city. And we give money back to that school every year. I don't know how our investment's doing right at the moment, but the plan is to be able to give money back to them. And I've also been on a number of boards in Newport, Child and Family Services, and about 4 or 5 other, nonprofit organizations. I've been on their boards. So I've been active in Newport throughout my life. I feel it's important to give back to the community. This community has done really well by me, and I like the opportunity of being able to give back. And that's why one of the reasons I'm running for school committee is because of that. And another reason for running for school committee is because I want to have a voice in what's going on in Newport at the moment.
Let's it's funny. I'm wondering, I don't know if you have a map or not, but I'm wondering if you've been involved with more public school systems than there, more than half of them.
Well, I've been involved with 12. So
there you go.
So 12 school, so getting close to half.
Yeah.
You know, and I've done some consulting in Cranston. I did consulting in Cumberland. So I mean, I've in South Kingstown. So I have been in more than half of the school districts in Rhode Island. So I've had a chance to see a lot of things. I've had a chance to, you know, interact with a lot of school boards. So I mean, I bring that experience to the table.
What excites you to stay involved over the years in public schools?
Well, you know what really has driven me into education and driven me through the years I've been in public schools is I was the kid in first grade who the teacher told my mother that I was not going to graduate from high school. And so I, in my later years, decided that, you know, first of all, I wasn't going to accept that, and I didn't. But I also wanted to be the champion for those kids who people dismiss and say, you know, they can't make it, they're not going to do it, they write them off. I wanted to be a voice for those kinds of kids, and that's what I've tried to do in my career, is be the person who, you know, doesn't dismiss those kids and tries to get support services. I'm the one who created the Partnership for Families in Newport, myself and a couple of other people, which is a big organization that supports public schools. And a lot of the programs that sit in the schools today with the family service workers, that's something that came in, you know, when I was here in Newport. And a lot of the other support services for kids in the school system here are things that I was part of.
What you mentioned that you know, one of the reasons you're running for school committee this year is because you want to be a part of the conversation. Talk to us about the conversation and you know, how you see you could be a good part of this conversation.
Well, you know, when you talk about regionalization, you know, there's a lot of different thoughts about that. There's a lot of people have a lot of different notions about what regionalization looks like. For regionalization back in 2013, I was part of the group that got a vote on the ballot as to whether Middletown and Newport could talk about regionalization. And Newport said, yeah, we're willing to talk about it. Middletown said, we don't want to do that. And, you know, and then, you know, the history that we came back around when the high school was being built and people said, before we pull the trigger on this, could we do a regional high school? You know, in Middletown at that point was a hard no on that. So now that the regionalization has come back around again, I wanted to be part of that conversation because I bring some thoughts to the table that, you know, I think need to be heard.
What do you think is the best path forward on the question 5, which authorizes the establishment of a regional school district? People can read all of the legalese and language on it. Vote.rri.gov. You can see all 10 questions on your sample ballot in Newport. What do you think is in the best interest of Newport public school students, Newport residents, when it comes to the regional school district question?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm running for school committee. I'm not running for council. So my interest here is going to be for the school department and for the students. And clearly, you know, school committees have to look at budgets. They have to look at buildings. They have to look at all that stuff. So I'm not dismissing that. So I think it's important to get answers to the questions that need to be answered. And I don't see that happening at this moment. You know, I've said this before to the school committee members, and I've said this to people in Middletown on the school committee. They need to get the 2 superintendents together and answer 2 questions. What does the budget really look like if they had to put the districts together tomorrow? What do those budgets look like? And what kind of programming opportunities are there for the kids? Those 2 people have been around for a period of time. I mean, I think that the superintendent of Newport's 10 years in probably, and the superintendent in Middletown's 20 years in. They can answer those questions. If we get the answer to those questions, it's going to make it easier for people to be able to take a position on whether it's a good idea or not. We haven't heard that. And time's running out. And I've heard from, you know, people running for the city council, they want to have this committee get together and look at what are the possibilities. That hasn't happened. They put that up 2 weeks ago and nothing's happened. But we could quickly at least get the answer to those two questions. What does the budget look like? Because the consultants put up slides that were theoretical. They were in theory. This is what happens in these other school districts. This is what happens over here. That's all theoretical. It's not what is going to happen here. And in the history of what has happened financially in Newport is not what is being portrayed when you talk about the savings. Because if you look back to when we took the elementary schools and we put them all under one roof at Pell School, and Pell Schools turned out terrific. But we also told the taxpayers, we're going to sell all the elementary schools and we'll take the profits from that, and we're also going to put those things back on the tax rolls. There's 2 buildings today, Triplet School, Cogswell School. They're still sitting there. They've never been sold, and they're not on the tax rolls. So, and I don't know the status of Sheffield Schools is a great utilization of a school building, but it didn't turn out the way that we said it was going to turn out. And that's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just a thing. So when we talk about the savings that we could get, and one of you, the candidates said, well, it's $900,000 a year, on the interest, we're going to get that for 20 years. $900,000 a year. If you put the 2 budgets together, those 2 budgets are going to be close to $90 million. So the $900,000 out of $90 million is 1%. We're going to spend 1% on the increased cost in energy, and in the increase that we're going to have to pay teachers because of inflation. So those numbers go very, very quickly, and there's going to be unintended consequences of putting things together. So I want some answers from people who actually know to tell me what the budget looks like. You've had people talk about the staffing probably isn't what it is because they don't have, some of the staff positions haven't been filled. Let's get those answers so that people can go to the poll and say, yes, I'm going to do it because I know what the numbers are, or close to what the numbers are. But right now, we don't know what the numbers are. And if history repeats itself, we're going to be in a situation where you're going to have a finance committee that's going to be driven to, hold costs down. You're going to have, a regional school committee that's going to be pushed for economies of scale, as the Newport School Committee is. So, those numbers are going to change. So to buy into, this is going to be whatever kind of savings you want to say, those are not going to be the numbers. I guarantee you can look at the history, go back as many years as you want. It never plays out the way you want it to play out. Even though as well-intentioned as people are, it's going to be different. Maybe it'll be better. I doubt it.
So it sounds like unless in the next 12 days that we get a lot of information from the superintendents, that you are on the reject side of the question.
Yeah, I want to know what the programs are going to be for kids. We've talked about programs for kids. I'm the one who has, whispered in the ear of the city council, if we get all this money, put it aside in the trust fund so that there's money there that we know it's going to go back to programming for kids and it doesn't get swallowed up in the process. I know that they can't commit to that, but, again, I'm looking at, what happens to the kids in this process. This is not something where we're going to build a road, we're going to build a bridge. This is something that will affect the kids in Newport going forward. And I want to make sure that whatever happens is in a positive venue, not a negative venue. And I think that you've heard from most of the people who are running for school committee, because I've listened to all your interviews, that they're interested in the best interest of kids. So, I want to get some information that if they can say to me, those 2 superintendents, listen, it's going to work out financially, it's great, and we've got all these programs, and they can name the programs and tell me what's going to happen, I'm more than happy to get behind that. But at this point, I haven't heard any of that. So at best, I'm lukewarm on it. And I've been a proponent for regional high school. Don't get me wrong. I would love to have seen a regional high school. I've looked at the research in New Jersey on regionalization. I've looked at the research in Connecticut on regionalization. I spoke to the director who's the head of all the regional school districts in Massachusetts to find out, about regionalization. Her take is, listen, there's not one regional program in Massachusetts that has 2 high schools. It's 1 high school. So, the process, one of your other folks talked about the process. This process should have been, let's see if Newport and Middletown are on the same page to begin with. If we are, let's move forward. I mean, that's the process we need to be going through. And the school committee has got to take a hold of this. I mean, they're still in office. They need to get those two superintendents together, and they need to get answers to these questions. They can do it, but they've got to do it now. They cannot wait around. I mean, I've heard their answers, but this is the time for them to take action.
You are the 7th candidate out of 8 that I've interviewed. There's only been one out of the 7 so far that has adamantly come out for the regional school district. The others are adamantly against it. 2 are on the fence, but I would, in my opinion, venture that they would lean towards rejecting it. Well, what does that say to you as somebody who has served on Newport School Committee before, you as a candidate, and what should the voters out there, what message should they walk away from that the vast majority of Newport School Committee candidates are against this question?
Well, I actually got stopped this morning by somebody who said, I'm going to support you for the school committee, and so I said, what's your take on regionalizations? Well, I'm for it, and they said, oh, really? So why are you for regionalization? And they told me, finances. So I explained to them what I just said to you about, the numbers are never the numbers. They're going to change. I don't believe that they're going to be as good as they are. You heard from other people in the interviews that, if you run the numbers and you look at what happens over time with teachers' salaries and benefits and the cost of utilities and all these other things you have to deal with, that it's going to pull those numbers apart very quickly. So, for me, it's hard for me to get behind that as much as I want regionalization. And like I said, I look at the research, I look at other states. And one of the other things that you heard was the size of the high school. And they talk about larger high schools when you have kids that have higher socioeconomic backgrounds, because you can do more because they don't need as much. When you have a population like Newport has, a smaller high school certainly adds benefit to where those kids, what the kids' needs are, and to be able to meet those needs. And while we get all tangled up in test scores, you got to take a look at the support services that kids can get in Newport. And you also have to take a look at where some of our high school graduates go. I mean, we've had some kids that have had some terrific places they go. They go to military academies, they go to Ivy League schools. I mean, I had a friend of mine say to me, had his kid at the high school, said, that experience at Rogers High School is one of the best kept secrets in Newport, that there's such a great program up there. And if you go there on awards night, when you're looking at the financial award stuff, in that room is hundreds of thousands of dollars, because Rogers High School has been around a long time. There's a lot of money available. You don't get that same money in Middletown or Portsmouth.
One of my biggest concerns, I try to stay in the middle here, is the vast majority of uneducated voters that are going to flip their ballot over and read some of these questions, and they're going to see regional school district, and they're going to see including incentives may exceed 80% of debt services for expenditures in. They are going to make decisions to approve or reject these questions, whether it's the cannabis or whether it's regional school district, and not know what they're really voting for. I know it's all of their own responsibility to do that research, but I think some of the wording concerns me of what is actually going to come out of it.
Yeah, no doubt. When people go into vote, they haven't looked at the issues. They pull a trigger for whatever they pull it for. The lever, or in our case now, it's filling in a blank with a pen. But yeah, it's going to be problematic. But that's why I'm saying we need now to get the superintendents together to answer a couple of questions, so at least we have some sense of where we're headed. Because if we don't do that, then people are going to say, in the absence of having that information, the information is going to be out there. It's going to be a dollars and cents kind of thing, and people will vote for dollars. I mean, that happens all the time. I mean, the argument for Pell School had to do with the economy of scale, and it took the day. The argument for Rogers High School had to do with finances and the ability to get 50%, half off on the cost of a high school. Those are some of the things that carry the day. There's no doubt that, and if I'm sitting in Middletown and I can get 80% and build all new schools, which I've talked to them about and said, listen, the first thing I would do is do 2 K-8 schools and a high school. I would not recreate the middle school model. If you look at Baltimore, you look at Philadelphia, you look at all the city schools, they're moving away from middle schools and they're going to K-8 schools. When we built Thompson Middle School, I went up to Somerville, Massachusetts. They were building a K-8 school. I said to myself, oh, I wish I had known about this, because maybe we would have done something different, but we were too far down the road for that. But, you know, so yeah, you're absolutely right. If they're going to look it over, they're going to see the dollars and cents. They're not going to understand all the underlying issues. And as I said before, those dollars and cents, they're not going to be what you think they're going to be. For reimbursement on building buildings, that's what it will be. Anything after that, who knows where that's going to go.
If there are cost savings, you know, where would you encourage them to go to?
Well, I think, first of all, cost savings is something that, you know, I think always should go back to programming kids. You know, you've heard some people talk about, you know, high quality curriculum. You know, one of the things I've said before is, you know, it's easy enough for us to look at Massachusetts, which is the highest performing state in the country, and look at some districts that look like us and say, what are the things that they do to get performance out of kids? What do they do to get test scores? You know, that's where we should invest our money. And I've heard from some of your other candidates that the Newport School Department is investing their money in those kinds of things. That's the right place to put the money.
If elected, what do you think? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Robert.
No, put the money into the kids. Put it into something. You know, and you've got to be careful when you get money, because, you know, Newport right now is sitting on a chunk of money, and we've got to make sure that that money doesn't get into things that are reoccurring expenses in the budget, because when that money goes, we're going to have a problem with the budget. And I think that the school committee so far has done a good job with, you know, the last couple of years with budgeting. They've done a nice job in being able to create a relationship with the city council, which has been good, because we've had problems with that in the past. And God bless them for being there and doing the pandemic for 2 years and not being able to do anything. I mean, that was a really hard position for them to be in. So, you know, kudos to them on those things. They've done a good job with those things.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what are some of the things that you thought the school committee have done well of recently? And on the flip side, I was going to ask you, you know, some of the things that you think they, under your, if you were a member of the committee, that you would have liked to have seen gone a different way, or that they haven't done well.
Well, right now, what I'm concerned about, and the reason I got involved in this, is they have not brought the two superintendents to the table. I mean, this is a critical time. This is the time to get going. We cannot wait on this. Time is running out. They've got to do that. They've got to get the answers to those questions. They can't sit back and let that go. Do I think it's going to change people's position? Probably not. But at least they're going to get closer to the answer, because the consultants did not help us by putting slides up that were theoretical, because it gave people a lot of reasons to attack that whole process and what could be. You know,
and I imagine that request to get the superintendents together, I'm just trying to think here quickly on the fly, could also come from Newport City Council.
It could come from City Council, but the superintendents work for the school committee. I mean, they're the ones that you know, do their evaluation. They're the ones that they answer to. I mean, there's not, you know, school committees don't have the power that people think that they do. They don't have a lot of things that they can change. I mean, there was a day, you know, back when the dinosaurs were around, that they probably influenced who got hired and a lot of other things. They don't have that power anymore. So, but they do have the ability to direct the superintendent to say, listen, I want you to do this, or I want you to do that. Superintendent can say no to that, but the superintendent also probably won't have a job in a couple of years.
Yeah. If elected in November, appointed in December, what do you see as a new sitting member, some of your priorities being?
Well, I think Newport, while people see it as maybe a problem, is we have a teacher shortage. The most important thing that we ever do is who we put in the front of those classrooms with those kids. That is a critical issue for any school department, any administration, is who we put with those kids. Because those people, if they go for 3 years, they get tenured, and they stay for 30 years. And so if you make a bad pick in that and don't look at that carefully over those 3 years, you end up with a problem. So what we're going to be faced with, and we need to look at now, is the recruitment of good quality teachers to Newport. Make sure that they want to stay here, and also to evaluate those teachers and make sure that if they're not doing their jobs, that we don't keep them. That don't be, just because we have a shortage doesn't mean we have to take what we have to take. You know, we can fill in the positions and then we can move on to the next year and say, listen, it was nice having you here. Thank you for coming. But, you know, we're going to look somewhere else. And that's a critical issue for us. And then, you know, and I'm hoping that, you know, if there aren't policies in place for that, then we need policies in place for that. We need to make sure that the interviews are run fairly. We need to, and I have no reason to believe that they're not. And we need to do recruitment for teachers and get people to come to Newport. Newport's a great place to work. I loved working in Newport.
You know, I've been asking some of the incumbents, but you've been there before, and you certainly have lots of experience in public school systems. What's something you wish everybody knew?
I wish everybody knew how good the school system is. The things that they do on a day-to-day basis for kids, the things that teachers do on a day-to-day basis for kids, and the kids themselves. I've mentored at the high school a couple of times. I volunteered to go up and I said to them, you know, tell me a kid who's struggling senior year. They gave me a name. I met with that kid once a week. I'd take them to lunch at the Colonial Dining Room and talk to them about, you know, how's school going? What are you doing? You know, what can we do, you know, from a school perspective to make life better for you? You know, if people knew the kinds of kids that are in the system, instead of looking at the test scores, if they knew the kids and what they do and had a chance to see that, and I know that they're not going to, they've got other lives, they've got busy things to do, they've got their own work, they've got their own families, they've got things to do. But, you know, when you get up close and personal with the kids, you get a sense of that. You know, you've got somebody running for school committee who's got kids in the school system. He's got a very clear view of the quality of the kinds of kids that we have in the school system. You know, if other people saw that and they were more engaged with that, they'd have a different perspective on that.
What, in your opinion, in your experience, what are some ways that the community can get involved and or support the school committee or public schools or the students of Newport?
Well, I mean, I just gave you an example of what I did. I think that, quite honestly, we could probably take a list of 20 or 30 kids at the high school and try to get mentors for those kids to try to keep them in school and to get them to graduation. When I was down in Westerly, you know, we looked at the top. Westerly's 1,000 kids in the high school. We looked at 40 kids that were, you know, kind of at risk for graduation. And from January to June, we worked those kids and their families to make sure they got across the stage. And I think we probably had about 6 or 7 kids that didn't make it. But, you know, that's the kind of stuff, that kind of involvement with the schools, you know, to get people into the schools with elementary schools. There's, you know, get some of the older people in to do, and I say older people because they have the time, you know, to do reading with kids and to engage in those kinds of things. You know, we can't be going to the public because we've got a bond issue to pass, or we go into the public because we want to get a vote on something. We've got to go to the public on a regular basis so that when something comes up in the school department, the public says, oh, we know about that. I mean, I think it's terrific that the superintendent gets on once a month and talks about the schools. I mean, that's the kind of stuff you need to do on a regular basis, not when there's some issue that we have a crisis going on.
And, you know, Superintendent Colleen Burns-Germain does join us the last Wednesday of every month. And something I'm going to, you know, add to our time there is ways upcoming that the public can get involved, and requests for volunteers and public events. And, you know, I believe it takes a village. I also believe that there are, it's so easy to talk about the challenges and the difficulties and the things that are going wrong. You know, if we can use our platform once a month, or, you know, as well as her newsletter that she sends out regularly, you know, maybe we can lift those opportunities up a little bit more of how people can get involved and support.
Yeah, they used to have volunteers in Newport Education. That was called Vine, and that program was around for a lot of years. Unfortunately, that's one of those programs that went away. The director retired, and it was actually run by the Newport School Department, and their mission was to go out and get volunteers to bring them into schools, to work with kids, to work in programs. It involved a lot of people, and some of the people that, you know, later on supported the schools in a variety of ways. And I said to you earlier, I've done fundraising for the schools, and I'm going to do it for Rogers High School. We're going to create an endowment for Rogers High School. I've already started that process. The fund is already set up with the city. And going forward, we're going to get, people involved in that. But you've got to get people in, and you've got to reach out to them. You've got to go. I mean, you've got candidates running for city council. You've already interviewed. Go out knocking on doors. You've got to go to the people. You can't say, I'm going to run something and I'm going to invite people to come to this thing. You've got to go to where they are and talk to them. You've got to go to the different organizations and speak about the schools. I mean, we went to 35 different organizations when we tried to get the Thompson bond passed. I mean, it took a lot of work to get that bond passed. Getting that bond passed set the stage for the Pell School, because people finally said, whoa, look, the school department did a pretty good job building the middle school, and they're going to save this money. And as I've already gone down the road of where maybe we didn't save as much because we've got buildings that are still sitting there, but they saw Pell School, and you see the Pell School with even the addition on it now, even better. And you've got Rogers High School, which is coming up, and Rogers High School is not going to be as easy as people think, because it's not out of the ground yet. And until you're out of the ground and dig all those foundations and find out what those issues are, that budget's going to start to move around again. That's another whole thing that people haven't even contemplated. You talk about people who maybe they think you're going to look at rugs and tiles and do some other things. Yeah, but there's going to be decisions where they may not have the money to do this facade, or you may not have the money to put these seats in, or you may not have the money to do this, and you're going to have to start shuffling things around because you've got a cost of coming up out of the ground, or you've got radon mitigation, which is over on that site. We had to do a lot of money when I was in the school department to mitigate some things that were under the 100 building because we had a radon problem. I'm sure they've probably built that into the building costs this time around, because the architects that the school committee finally has gotten to is a really good architect. And so I think they'll do a really good job. But, starting out, the architects that we started out with over at Rogers High School were not the right architects for that project.
I have a question for you, and I haven't asked anybody else, but I think it's important. It could be a very obvious answer, but I think it's important with your experience. I don't know what percentage of people, voters, taxpayers in Newport, never went through the school system or don't have kids in the system, don't plan on it. But why should the average taxpayer resident in Newport that never has gone through Newport Public Schools, never is going to never use Newport Public Schools, why should they care and invest and follow Newport Public Schools? Well,
they should care because that is the fabric of the community, and the quality of the schools is what oftentimes attracts the folks who come to live in the community. And there's a whole conversation about the lack of housing, and there's a whole conversation about the cost of living in Newport. But if you don't have a strong school system, it drives people out. I mean, I've lived here long enough to watch people move to Middletown and Portsmouth. I mean, Rogers High School was a regional high school. All the kids in Middletown and Portsmouth and Jamestown all went to Rogers High School. They've all moved off. Jamestown, ironically, we built a bridge and they went to North Kingstown. I don't get that. But I understand why, Middletown created their own high school and Portsmouth created their own high school. The people in Newport wanted a house with a white picket fence, and the only place they were going to get that was out in Portsmouth. So it's really important that this system be a good, strong system and provide, things for kids. And graduation is a really important thing for us. And we've got to, people look at that. And like I said, I had a friend of mine who said, Rogers High School was one of the best places his kid ever went. And, it was a well-kept secret, and their child went off to a great school. So, yeah, it's really important that we have a strong school system and that people understand what we do for kids. There's a lot of kids that are benefiting from the Newport Public Schools, and that, as much as we'd like to, doesn't get out there. And the reason that sometimes we stumble on that is that if you get a teacher or a couple of teachers that are unhappy with one particular aspect of the schools, and they bring that up on Second Beach or Third Beach or Gooseberry Beach, and they talk about it, it becomes gospel, and that hurts us when that stuff happens, and it's not pervasive. It's an isolated situation, but it becomes a huge issue for us. So that's another thing that we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot sometimes when we say those kinds of things. We've got to be very careful about that.
Robert, before I ask why people should vote for you upcoming here in the next couple of weeks, were there any other topics that we didn't get to today?
No, I think that, I've told you, why I'm running for school committee. I've told you what my background is. I think that, one of the strengths that I bring to the table is I have a lot of experience from a lot of different districts. I have a tendency to analyze things, to look for the research on things, and to try to, sift through. Just because somebody says something doesn't mean it's true. And that's one of the things I think that I worry about with the dollars and cents on this issue is what are the real dollars and cents? And that's why I'm going to go back to, I want those two superintendents to get together and to give us a look at what they think that budget's going to look like. Because if they hired me tomorrow and said, you're the superintendent for a year, we want you to put the two districts together, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get those two in a room and say, all right, let's talk about what we've got for staff. And where are we duplicating, and where do we have to fill in? And that's the first thing I'm going to do. That's 80% of the budget is going to be staff. And then I'm going to take a look at what are the opportunities for kids and programming, and what, we have ROTC, and what is it going to take to bring kids to ROTC from Middletown? And if Middletown voters think that if they regionalize that the kids are not going to be put together, I'm here to tell you that at some point there's going to be a regional high school, because the economy of scale is not going to allow people to have two high schools. It's not going to stay there. Will it stay there for 15 or 20 years? Maybe. But after that, I don't know. And the way that the whole process is set up is that if Newport wants to do something with Thompson 10 or 15 years from now, it's going to take the vote of Newport and Middletown, if it's a regional district, to do something. Right now, Newport has a vote on what they do with their own things. Again, I'm not anti-regionalization. I'd be very clear about that. I'm for a regional high school. But the proposal that's in front of us right now is something that came, in my estimation, in a way that makes it very difficult for people to get a clear sense of what they're voting for. And when you ask people to vote for something and you don't know what you're voting for, it's kind of like, well, you might have won the lottery. Who knows?
Who knows? If people want to see what they're voting for, they can visit vote.ri.gov. See all the candidates, see all the sample ballots. Of course, you can compare and contrast all of these interviews on whatsupnuke.com. Robert, I want to wish you the very best of luck over the next couple of weeks, and we will chat with you again soon.
And I hope people will vote for me. If they don't, I completely understand that.
All right. Well, good luck, and thank you for taking the time to chat with us, and thank you for all you do for public school students in Rhode Island over the years.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, so that is Robert Power, and he is one of 8 candidates running for Newport School Committee. You can see our conversation with 7 of the candidates. We do have contact with the one candidate we haven't chatted with yet, and we'll get that interview set up soon. Again, you can find all of the interviews on whatsupnuke.com. You can watch them like you may have just done for a portion of this. You can listen to them if you are on the go via podcast. On whatsupnuke.com or on your favorite podcasting platform. Just look up What's Up Podcast with Ryan Belmore, and we will keep bringing you these interviews all month long. We will dive deeper into question number 5, the regional school district. We will have something on that pretty soon, and we'll have more interviews with people regarding that question as well. Thank you for watching.